Time and time again, we're met with examples of misremembering, or perhaps government-altered realities. Some of these examples can be quite strange and come as a shock to most. Number 10. Edward Peter McMahon Jr., or Ed McMahon for short, was an American comedian, announcer, and game show host. Ed was famous for his appearance on The Tonight Show from 1962 to 1992, and he'd also hosted Star Search from 83 to 95. The announcer co-hosted as well on TV's Bloopers and Practical Jokes from 82 to 86. He's also known for his various other appearances on game shows and hosting alongside other announcers. A discussion ensued on the Mandela Effect subreddit after Terrible You 2833 had made a post stating that she and her husband had their minds blown when he had asked her what she had known about Ed McMahon aside from Star Search. She responded immediately with Publisher Clearinghouse, a marketing company that would sell merchandise and magazine subscriptions that was founded in 1953. The husband had also seemed to remember that Ed was associated with Publishers Clearinghouse, but they soon discovered that it was just part of a Mandela effect. One user was stumped, stating that they recalled that Ed was in fact a spokesperson for the company. Her grandmother had received the small magazines so often that she'd been trying to leave the user's grandfather for Ed. In fact, the announcer had worked for a different company that was called American Family Publishing, and perhaps people were confusing the two due to the last word of the title. Another user, ICFunction9323, recalls the commercials where the host would be holding the large checks with some balloons and would go to a random door and ring the bell. The winners at the end of the commercial would always thank Publishers Clearinghouse. But there's no evidence aside from the memories of viewers that suggest that the man had ever been a part of or worked for this company. American Family Publishing and PCH had regularly been mistaken for each other, which is possibly another cause of the false memory. Those who knew of these companies and Ed McMahon are convinced that the host would stand next to the winners holding these checks with big smiles painted on their faces. Heated debates ensued in the comments section of Terrible You's post. Many recalled that the company involved had been PCH and not AFP, while others recall that he never worked for PCH and there's no evidence to state that he did. It was found that Ed had in fact handed out checks on one of the shows that he was involved in, but it had never been Publishers Clearinghouse, as most would remember it. This particular Mandela effect was said to be the act of mistaking the two companies for one another, as it so often would happen. WV Prepper, another user, stated that the two companies were similar, and Cold Blue Lights, another commenter, asked the user to show him the Ed commercials, which she linked. Cold Blue Lights didn't recall seeing these commercials. Prepper would then ask how the user thought that anyone was able to redo various commercials to convince the masses that Ed never worked for PCH. Cold Blue Lights explained further that he didn't believe that anything had been faked, but rather altered. This is the common belief amongst those who've experienced the Mandela effect. It's been accredited to time shifts or entering new realities, and sometimes government interference. The phenomenon is so incredibly strange and enigmatic that we may never know what causes it. While guesses can be made for some and obvious answers can be found for others, there are a few that are just simply creepy, with no apparent explanation. Number 9. Casablanca refers to an American drama film that had been released in 1942. It had been loosely based upon an unproduced play by Murray Burnett and Joanne Allison called Everybody Comes to Rick's. The film was an emotionally charged romance that was set during the time of World War II. It is said to be an iconic motion picture and one of the most celebrated in history. The movie is set in Casablanca, where many Europeans had become stranded after seeking refuge from the war. It was found in this movie that a famous line is often quoted. For an unknown reason, most people remember that the broken-hearted Rick says, "Play it again, Sam," to his musician friend, after Sam had just gone into a rendition of Time Goes By. It may come as a shock that this famous and often quoted line never existed, and we've somehow convinced ourselves otherwise as time has gone on. It's this catchphrase that was often cited by the generation that had seen the original film in the cinema. But it's this phrase that was not said in the original film, nor in any movie that Humphrey Bogart had starred in thereafter. The closest lines to the misremembered quote have been, quote, "Play it once, Sam, for old time's sake," which is followed by "Play it, Sam," but this is said by Bergman and not Bogart's character. The actual line that his character utters is, "You played it for her, you can play it for me," followed by "play it." In 1972, there had been a Broadway play and a popular film with Woody Allen and Diane Keaton that used the misremembered quote as a title. When it was released, there was a realization that it had been a misquote, which many were unaware of at the time. It could be that it was this play and movie that was responsible for the false memory, but for many, the memory is quite real. It was this example that also found its way onto the Mandela Effect subreddit, where some individuals knew that it had been a misquoted line from years back, whereas others quoted the line believing that it was the correct one. This example has featured on almost every one of the Mandela Effect lists. While it can be accredited to one misquote from a famous movie, it certainly sparked unease in the community. Number 8. In 1975, one of the most popular movies ever was released. It was the American horror film directed by Steven Spielberg, Jaws, which centered around a rogue shark. It had been based upon a 1974 novel that had the same name, written by Peter Benchley. The movie had not only broken box office records, but it also changed the way in which Hollywood had marketed and distributed movies. It's in this film that a famous line is uttered by Roy Schneider, and it's become the subject of a Mandela effect. It's at the point in the film where Schneider is throwing bait into the water. While he's distracted, the shark pops up behind him, causing the character to back away. Schneider then says to another character, "We're gonna need a bigger boat." At least, this is how fans and viewers remembered it. It's this line that's been subject to false memories or the altering of history. Schneider's character actually yelled, "You're gonna need a bigger boat," with a cigarette dangling from his mouth. This was noted by Jay Krista 8 years ago, who asked the Reddit community what the first word of the quote was and proceeded to say that it apparently was not "we're." The user had come across this Mandela effect on YouTube under a username Same Feet, who had a history with the movie and the film. It's Same Feet who also remembers and believes that the word was "we're." Jay Krista linked a clip from Jaws and told the viewers to note the title, which read, "We're gonna need a bigger boat." This clip had been viewed over 100,000 times. It was also found that there had been a lack of commenters stating that the title was wrong. After further research, the Redditor found that other clips had their video titled as "You're gonna need a bigger boat." When the user had heard about movie lines changing, he'd read through a few different lists of misquoted lines and never recalled this being one of them. It is possible that he'd skipped over this entry, or it had only been altered around that time. A Redditor commented on this post stating that they were not a fan of this movie, but also distinctly remember the line using the words "we're" and not "your." Troy Cheek, another user, explained that they too were certain that it was "we're," and that he'd recorded the movie on his DVR and watched it a couple nights prior. He then proceeded to pull it up, and sure enough, the "we're" had been changed to "your," but also noted that the closed captions, though, had said "we're." A deleted user's stepfather had been a huge fan of this movie and played it on a regular basis. The line, as he remembered it, was always "We're gonna need a bigger boat," and he never recalled the altered version. The comments appear to be split, where some remembered that the movie did use the word "your," and others believe it was simply an altered memory. Additionally, the first Sharknado movie had parodied the misremembered version of the line, "We're gonna need a bigger chipper," which can be found 57 seconds into the movie trailer. The line is also parodied in the movie Clerks. If one were to search "We're gonna need" on YouTube, various videos of the misquoted title pop up. Our favorite movie lines, books, titles, song lyrics, and logos are in the process of being subjected to minor alterations, or perhaps the psychology behind false memory is more accurate and prevalent than we may have thought. Number 7. I Love Lucy was an American sitcom that aired from 1951 to 1957 on CBS. It was a popular TV show in America for 4 of the 6 seasons. The show won 5 Emmy Awards, including the Best Situational Comedy in 1953 and 54. In 56, the Best Actress Award was given to Lucille Ball, who played Lucy. The show was centered around the lives of Lucy Ricardo and Ricky Ricardo, who was a band leader. The couple lived in Manhattan's Upper East Side, and Lucy's role was as a housewife who had a dream to start a show business career. In attempts to pursue this path, she would concoct hilarious schemes, which would be doomed in the end. Most people who watched this sitcom recall Ricky's famous words, "Lucy, you have some splainin' to do." Within the 6 seasons of the show, the character never utters this line specifically. But he did, however, say, "Lucy, splain," or "you got some splainin' to do," or "splain that if you can." Which it could be argued that the false memory was just a combination of the 2 lines. But many viewers and fans distinctly remember him saying, "Lucy, you've got some splainin' to do." One individual argued that their mother, who's in her 50s, had remembered Ricky saying that exact line often. The line has been referenced many times throughout the years. The mother of this individual, who posted on the Mandela Effect subreddit, believes that this is due to mass suppression of the media that's being used to test our memories. Another user, Unga Balunga, had stated that he's unsure as to which is scarier, an entity that's gaslighting us, or the sifting of realities where only minor things have been altered, causing one to question the nature of existence. Number 6. Joan Jett is said to be one of the greatest rock singers of her time. The American singer is also a guitarist, songwriter, record producer, and an actress. She's well known for her work in Joan Jett and the Black Hearts. Joan is one of the founders of The Runaways, a punk rock band. In 2015, her band was added into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Some of her most famous songs include "I Love Rock and Roll," "Bad Reputation," "I Hate Myself for Loving You," and "Crimson and Clover." It's one of these famous songs that's been the subject of a strange Mandela effect. A user named Chuckster85 took to the Mandela Effect subreddit when they discovered that one of the lyrics in "I Love Rock and Roll" had been altered. They explained that the lyric, "I saw him standing there by the record machine," now read, "I saw him dancing there by the record machine." Chuckster expressed that he went to look for various different clips of the song, but all of them now used the word dancing instead of standing. They had no doubt that the version they grew up with had said standing, and had even listened to it 2 years prior to the lyric change. It was furthered that various covers used the word standing, but the Joan Jett version all used dancing. Other Redditors seemed to agree with this poster. Justin Time Warp stated that it had always been standing, and that he would sing the song over and over. The song had originally been sung by the Arrows, in which they would use the word dancing, but many remember that Joan Jett's version used standing instead. Justin Time Warp also stated that when men had sung the song, it was dancing, and when Joan had sung the song, it would be altered to fit with the gender change. Chuckster stated that he had asked Joan on Twitter about the lyric she remembered, but has yet to receive a response. Andy C333 also clearly remembers the word standing, and said this confirms that we're in an alternate reality. Peachy1991 commented the following, saying, quote, "I remember standing. Dancing by the record machine sounds lame and doesn't even work." Another viewer also recalled belting out standing at the top of their lungs. There are a few famous songs such as this one that have been added to the mystery of the Mandela effect. Some argue that our history is being changed right before our eyes. Number 5. In the book of Judges, chapter 16 in the Bible, we find the story of Samson and Delilah. Samson was a legendary warrior and judge of great strength, and a member of the tribe of Dan. His physical strength, which he'd used against the Philistines for 20 years, had come from his uncut hair. Delilah had been a Philistine who'd been the last love story of Samson. She would bribe and entrap the great warrior and learn the secret of his strength, of which she would later use against him. In the Bible, it reads that the rulers of the Philistines had gone to Delilah and instructed her to lure him in and find out what the secret to his strength had been. Delilah would then go on to ask Samson what the secrets of his strengths were, and how he could be tied up. Each answer that he gave had been proven false when the Philistines had attacked. It was only until Delilah had said, "How can you say I love you when you do not confide in me?" Each day, the warrior was prodded for his secrets until he grew tired and finally told her how it could be done. He expressed that his strength lay in his uncut hair, and that no razor had been used upon his head. He stated that if his head were to be shaved, his strength would dwindle. It's at this point that Delilah had called for the Philistines once more, after having let Samson fall asleep on her lap. Many believe that this is the part where she cut off the braids that held the strength of the warrior. But faulty memory proves this to be false. Delilah had not been the one to rid the man of his hair, but had rather called for someone else to do it. A man had shaved off all 7 of Samson's braids. This had shocked a deleted Reddit user, who brought it into the community's attention in the subreddit for Mandela effects. One user also recalls that it had been Delilah who had done the act herself and quoted a line from the song Samson by Regina Spektor, which read, "Oh, I cut his hair off myself one night, a pair of dull scissors in the yellow light." Another individual recounted the old Samson and Delilah song, which stated, "She spoke so kind, she talked so fair, while Samson said Delilah cut off my hair." The commenters seemed to be in agreement that they recalled that this was the woman who'd performed the act of ridding Samson of his strength. Luckily, there was some residual evidence for this strange supposed Mandela effect. A user named Transformati listed various links in their comment of old classical paintings that each depict Delilah cutting Samson's hair. This included the 1537 painting titled Samson and Delilah, which resides in Germany. The image depicts a great warrior asleep on the lap of the fair woman, who's seen cutting his hair with a pair of scissors. In another painting, a similar depiction can be seen where Samson lies on top of the woman only to have his hair cut by her. Various songs and paintings, and possibly plays throughout history, do seem to depict that it was she who committed the act. Yet the community is being led to believe that Delilah had gotten someone else to cut the hair of the warrior. There is a large pushback against this story, as many believe to have been different. After many have gone through a few different versions of the Bible, they found no story that states that it was Delilah, but rather another man, which has sparked debate and confusion on multiple social media platforms. Number 4. Debates had sparked on the Mandela Effect subreddit when a user called attention to the fact that there's no longer a robber emoji amongst the many different depictions within the emoji lists. Some distinctly recall seeing and even using a robber emoji. It featured a yellow face with a black bandit mask and a black and white striped shirt. In the list, it was displayed from the torso upwards. Others recall there being a robber emoji that appeared to be running and was equipped with a brown money bag, which was assumed to be filled with stolen cash and had a $sign clearly marked. While some debate whether there's been one version or two versions of the emoji, there are some who simply deny both altogether, claiming that they're confusing it with a scene from one of the Despicable Me movies. One individual had recreated the running emoji through Photoshop, asking if this had been the robber they remembered. The emoticons, both the torso and the running man, had never existed before, despite our memories clearly recalling such a depiction. Currently, there are around 3,300 emojis in the Unicode consortium. Many are convinced that the robber was at least one of them. Experts, however, have allegedly confirmed that this emoji never existed, but is rather a clear example of the Mandela effect. An image was mocked up by a Twitter user of the burglar emoticon and stated that they had sworn that it had existed. Many users replied to it and agreed that it had indeed existed, with one asking if they'd all just collectively imagined this emoji. Another had stated that they'd even made use of the burglar around 3 years prior, and even Emojipedia confirmed that it had never existed. Alongside the missing robber emoji, there have also been questions about where the hiker one had disappeared to. Some recall that there had been a hiker emoji equipped with trekking poles and a helmet. While one individual was in the process of combing through Reddit, they came across a simple question from Babs2115 in an Ask Reddit page. The question was, what happened to the hiker emoji? For many, a clear image of this hiker will come to mind. The one that wore a red shirt and was equipped with the poles and positioned in a walking action. A few will remember that this emoticon actually had a mountain in the background. In another Reddit post, this time in the Mandela Effect page, a deleted user had brought up the same question. Many had agreed that they had seen this emoji and even detailed its features, which had included the red shirt, poles, and a hat or helmet. Another user explained that their family is part of a company for hiking and camping apparel and equipment. In the original biography of their Instagram, there had been a line that read, "Your first stop for hiking," accompanied by the hiking emoji. Unfortunately, this evidence is no longer there, and it's believed that the masses are being convinced that some of these events or things never happened or were never there. Many social media users clearly remember the existence of these two emojis, but they seem to have disappeared off the face of the earth. Number 3. Many individuals may recall having a conversation with their parents about why the side view mirror says objects in mirror may be closer than they appear. Unfortunately, this warning seems to be another subject of false memories, as the correct term now reads objects in mirror are closer than they appear. There's no hint as to where the may be had gone to, if it was deliberately removed in newer cars, or if our history was altered once more. This is the argument that Lucky Numbers 11-2 brings to the subreddit Mandela effect. Another user recalled very specific conversations about the wording and why it seemed like an unsure thing. They would receive answers relating to angles or how eyes work differently depending on the person. To this individual, the wording just seemed absurd and thought it needed to be changed. It had been some time in their late teen years that they had noticed that the mirrors would now state the warning a lot clearer by leaving out the may be part. They would soon find out that the words had never been included in the warning in the first place. Chip41 then asked if they had remembered what year this had been in, and recounted that a similar event happened to her around 1997. The individual had been uncertain about the year, but believed it to be between 2007 or 2008, and also noted that the words had not been on the mirror of their truck. Another user stated that around 2008, they too remembered the words may be being present in the quote. Strangely enough, Stephen King also appears to remember the wording a little differently. On the first page of Chapter 2 of Desperation, on page 184 of From a Buick 8, and on page 222 of Misery, each states it the way that the rest of the world had remembered it. Objects may be closer. Stephen King was not the only celebrity to reference this warning. In the 90s, Meatloaf had released a hit song titled Caution, Objects May Be Closer. Another commenter stated that the song had been titled as follows, saying, quote, objects in the rearview mirror may appear closer than they are, which is fairly similar to the faulty memory that everyone else appears to have. Rivensdale17 commented the following on Reddit, saying, quote, I've done tons of driving in my life, and may be closer did exist for quite some time. 100% sure of this. With all due civility, the skeptics just don't get it. The idea that the term had been taken out of the warning on newer cars was quickly debunked, after it was found that in the 1993 Jurassic Park movie, the side view mirror of the vehicle held the warning, objects in mirror are closer than they appear. Many individuals had pondered the meaning of the may be that was engraved on the mirror. They would think that the mirror should make up its mind, is the object closer or isn't it? Incredibly, some evidence has been found that this saying had existed, such as in David Letterman's Top 10s. In an article, Letterman revealed the top 10 things that sounded cool when it was spoken by James Earl Jones. Number 10 had been, quote, I can't believe it's not butter, with objects in the mirror may be closer than they appear falling in at number 9. In addition to this unchanged slip-up, some car advertisements had read the similar line. News clippings of advertisements had each stated the following, saying, quote, objects in mirror may be closer than they appear. This leads to the question, was it a false memory, or are our memories the subject of an experiment? Number 2. Richard Simmons is known as one of the most famous and iconic fitness personalities. He's been a fitness instructor and a motivator for more than 40 years. The personality would make use of his wit, enthusiasm, and passion to reach out to the community and deliver a serious message that ultimately aided in millions of overweight individuals losing thousands of pounds by adopting better eating programs, as well as funding exercise regimes. Richard had often worn strange and colorful workout attire that was often paired with a headband, except it actually wasn't. The fitness personality had never worn a headband, and this is causing quite a stir. Reddit user Cheez-It and Friends brought up this exact Mandela effect on the subreddit dedicated to this phenomenon. Cheez-It explained that Richard was the new and more recent Mandela effect example. Anyone who was into aerobics and exercise in the 1980s would know of this individual and recall that he had worn a headband. However, when looking back at all these videos and TV show appearances, it seems there is an absence of headwear on the man's forehead. Some remember that he'd switched between wearing one that was red and one that was blue. There's also some residual evidence online relating to the idea that he had worn a headband. People who dressed up as Richard for Halloween pair their costume with the headpiece in an 80s style. This only supports the idea that the fitness instructor is remembered as wearing a headband, and many cannot picture him without one. Some argue that the man may have never worn this item, but rather had wristbands, which may be the cause of this particular example of faulty memories. Others suggest that he would never have worn such an item as it would mess up his frantic, curly hair. A TikTok personality named Kelly Mano found herself becoming quite animated on this topic. She's described herself as TikTok's unofficial ambassador of Gen X. A debate had erupted after Kelly had responded to a comment, which read, quote, "Wait until she finds out Richard Simmons never wore a headband." In her response, Kelly expressed the following, saying, "What do you think they did? Went through the whole internet and scrubbed every photo of Richard Simmons ever wearing a headband?" She would then proceed to play a slideshow, showcasing the personality in his iconic outfits without the addition of the headpiece. Kelly was in utter shock and began to show images of people who had replicated the influencer's outfit for Halloween. In each of these images that she produced, they'd all worn the headband. She would additionally include images of costumes based on Richard and how they would look if they were to buy it, and these sets do not include the headband. Kelly asked why they would try to rewrite or remake history, and began to reference Back to the Future. She also referred to the constant changes that our society continues to experience at random. The TikTok user had gone as far as saying that they're trying to make a lot of us look crazy. It stated that Richard had risen to fame in the 70s, which is when he'd begun to release aerobics videos on VHS before opening up his own gym. It was during this time that gym wear would feature tight and brightly colored attire, as well as wristbands and headbands. One such example can be found in the video for Olivia Newton-John's Physical that was released in 1981. She's seen sporting such a headband in this video. When one takes a look at Richard's official YouTube channel, though, you'll find that the fitness instructor himself is not seen wearing a headband at all throughout the entirety of his video collection. It's likely that most will believe that Richard should be wearing a headband given the era in which he was prominent in. This could be the cause of the Mandela effect that's had an impact on the memories of many individuals worldwide. Number 1. The creation of Adam refers to a famous work of art in the Sistine Chapel. It's also one of the most famous pieces of modern artwork. Michelangelo had created this masterpiece around 1511 on the ceiling of the chapel, among various other installments. This painting was said to be one of the more complex ones, and had taken 16 days to complete. It initially started with the figure of God, before including the angels and ending with the figure of Adam. The creation of Adam is a very well-known painting, and it's referred to often, and can be visibly pictured in the minds of many. The image had been influenced by the Genesis phrase, "God created man in his own image." The artist depicted two figures of similar build, with Adam lying on the ground on the left-hand side, and God on the right, where he's surrounded by angels. One of the main features of this artwork is the fingers of both God and Adam's fingers touching one another. The index finger of the creator points in an authoritative manner at Adam, whose hand appears weak and ready to receive energy through God. In the painting, Michelangelo represented the divine breath of life using the fingers of both figures. Reddit user SpiritedMood5851 posted to the Mandela Effect subreddit, asking if anyone remembers the creation of Adam painting a little differently than how it's seen today. They explained that initially, God was positioned higher than Adam, and their fingers had not met at all. It then changed to where God had been at an even level with the figure, and their fingers had touched. It was then thought that the creator was much higher than Adam, and was looking down at him from an angle, where the fingers had also not met. In addition to this, a lot of individuals recalled that the painting was named the creation of man, not the creation of Adam. There seem to be various misremembering examples associated with this artwork particularly. Some had remembered that it was painted by Da Vinci, not Michelangelo. Another individual recalled that the creator had been shirtless but now wears white. Many others seemed to recall that Adam's face had looked significantly more desperate and urgent, whereas now his expression appears uninterested. After one Redditor commented that he recalled God being situated between two figures, the poster explained that this subject has shifted 3 or 4 times within our memories. This meant, according to them, that we may have experienced at least 4 reality shifts because of the Mandela effect. Huckleberry, another commenter, told the users to look at the ET cover, stating that the person responsible for the design had gotten the inspiration from creation of Adam. And it certainly appears this way when looking at the cover. E.T.'s hand is positioned above the boy's, the same as how most of us remember the creation of Adam being laid out. Most people will either remember that God was above Adam, or that the two had been equal, but in fact, it's none of these, but rather that God's hand is a bit lower than the figure opposite of him. One Redditor referred to another piece of artwork that was made based on the creation of Adam. In this depiction, God is positioned higher up, which looks more correct than what the painting looks like now. It can be argued that various angles of the same image have been released on social media over the years, which may have contributed to misremembering how the actual depiction looks. Additionally, many have gotten tattoos or created works of art where the hands are positioned differently, and most of the time they're not equal. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.